Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to my daily devotion. And I want to talk about something today that affects everybody. And really, I usually try to talk about things that we all can benefit from. But I want to talk about faith, and not just faith, but I want to talk about little faith. And there's no one that brags about having little faith, but we know that there are great things that can be done if you have a little faith. And I also will tell you that I'm going to be talking about this again. I'm just going to kind of perhaps touch the surface of it, and then whether it be tonight or Sunday, I don't know. I'll be getting back in touch with this idea, and but I think there's enough here that I can have say a little bit today. 2 Kings chapter 7. In verse 3 through 5, now there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate, and they said one to another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say we will enter the city, the famine is in the city, and we will die there. And if we sit here, we die also. Now therefore, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians, and if they keep us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall only die. They sit here, they're going to die. If they go into the city, they're going to die. So they said, let's fall into the hands of the Syrians. At least there's a chance. There's a chance. And they rose at twilight to go into the camp of the Syrians. And when they had come to the outskirts of the Syrian camp, to their surprise, no one was there. In case if you've forgotten this familiar story, the Syrians didn't hear 4 leprous men dragging their feet into the camp, but they heard the sound of an approaching army, and God had taken that very meager offering of faith that those 4 leprous men had, and caused the Syrians to hear a great army. And not only a great army, they said the Israelites, they must have hired others, and this is a great company of people. The number or the sound they heard was so frightening that they left everything there. And of course, we know the story. The lepers went back to the city and said, "We found the campsite of the enemy, and there's plenty of food there." It's a part of our nature to doubt, and some of us are better at it than others. But it's just that's a part of our nature. If I ask you where your faith was on a scale of 1 to 10, there's not too many that would grab that 10 spot. Some of you may be hovering down in the 2 or the 3. I don't know. It depends on where you're at. And circumstances has a lot to do with how we feel in regards to our faith. But we don't know everything, right? We don't know everything. We don't understand everything. And because of that, it causes us to have doubt. We've all had experiences that robbed us of our faith. We felt like things would go right. We got ready for it. We prepared for the right outcome, and everything went left. And so no one here is so spiritual that you haven't struggled with doubt at some point. You may identify more with the father that brought his demon-possessed son to Jesus. And Jesus says, all things are possible to him that believes. And he said, I believe, but I need you to help my unbelief. And I think that more clearly describes most people than any scripture in the Bible. We believe, but we do need help with our unbelief. In other words, while I'm believing and while I'm trusting God, right along beside that is a part of me that says, I need help with believing. It's my unbelief that's my problem. While I'm believing, I'm having unbelief. And there's always that element to our human nature that while we're up, we're still a little down. And while we're believing, we still have a little unbelief. 1 Peter 5:7 says, casting all your care upon him because he careth for you. We must cast all of our care on him because he's the one that cares for us. Ephesians 3:20, now unto him that's able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we're able to ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. And there we may come across what we could possibly identify as the weak link. It's the power that's working in us. We rejoice over other people's victories. We celebrate with them. We're glad to hear good news. It builds up our faith until our faith is on the line, until our circumstance is depending on our faith. And a lot of preaching and teaching deals with faith because we have to have faith, and we constantly have to be building our faith back up. I think that's all of us. Why is that? Well, because we quickly go back into situations that we thought we had faith, we had it figured out, we truly believed, but it didn't turn out the way we thought. So we have options here. Either we say it wasn't the will of God, or too many times we say, well, my faith is failing. And we're humans, and we are imperfect, and we know in part, we see in part. It's not all perfectly clear right now. There's not one of us that knows exactly what tomorrow holds. Not one of us. So our sight is limited. Our understanding is limited. We really know pretty much what's happening right now, but we don't know it for sure. We know that we're breathing in and out. We know our heart's beating, but we don't know it will be beating this time tomorrow. We're pretty sure. What's the percentage of that? 99.9? Well, then we know about somebody that, they passed. Well, so there's nothing that's certain. There's always the uncertainty that's there. John 14:14, Jesus said, if you ask anything in my name, I will do it. I will do it. You ask anything in my name. Another way of saying that is if you ask anything according to his will. Is it a catch? Well, no, it's just a principle. That we can't just ask anything in his name, but we do need to pray and ask according to the will of God. And so to know the will of God, I've got to discover it as it applies to my life. And I think that's a great lesson for any of us to learn. I could tell you about my victories, and I've shared them with you, and you've got your own victories and miracles that have happened. And I could probably convince you, at least for a little while, to totally not doubt, because we could testify, talk about how great God is, and he is. He fulfills our longing. He tests our life. He tests our faith and makes our faith stronger. And by that stronger faith, we see God do greater things. But I think after a while, our doubts come back. And that's where we live. After a while, our doubts come back. Even after a great church service. And we haven't had together services in so long. And online has to be what we can do. And we really have to fill in that void of not being together. That void has to be filled in with faith. Say, Lord, I must just know that I can still have the same results, even though I may not be where everybody's at. And so that's a challenge, and we're all dealing with that right now. So I'm preaching today, or teaching to you. This is not preaching, we're just talking, on the premise that if you can just take a step towards God, and it might not be full blown, it may not be fully developed. In other words, your step you're taking might be filled with some reservations, but it's better to step out with a little bit of reservation than to just stand still. So walk forward in the faith that you have. Step out in the faith that you have. And I believe today, not that I'm feeling this, just because I know just the law of averages, that there's somebody today that needs to hear this. Step out in the faith that you have and let God be God. Let God do the rest of it. See, if God in your life right now is, he's that possibility, then that's the possibility that you want. And God can be that. You don't have to have the perfect life, and you don't have to have the perfect 100% faith, but operate in what you do have. See those 4 lepers? They said, but here's the thing. If we go into the city, everybody's dying there. There's a famine. If we sit here on the outside of the city, well, we're going to die out here. And so there's a chance, because we don't know the Syrian army. We don't know what mood they're in. They might keep us as prisoners of war. We're lepers. What's the worst thing that could happen? Because we're going to die if we sit here. And they stepped out in the faith that they had, and they brought a victory prophesied by the Elisha the prophet. And they brought a great victory for the city. And they didn't even have to go into the city until after they had good news to share with them. So if you feel that you only have a slim chance of being delivered, then I'm asking you today to act on that slim chance. Act on that chance. In Matthew chapter 14, I don't want to read all these verses to you, but there is a scene here. It starts at verse 25. And this is the story where Jesus came walking to the disciples on the sea. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled and they thought it was a spirit. They didn't know it was Jesus. But then Jesus spoke to them, and he will always clarify his presence if we wait. And he said, hey, be of good cheer. It is I. Don't be afraid. And Peter spoke up in a moment of supernatural faith. And he said, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come walking on the water. And he said, come. And he got out of the boat and he started walking on the water, and he walked on the water for a little while. And I would rather walk on the water for a little while than to stay in the boat and regret it the rest of my life and say, I wonder what could have happened. But in that moment, he was impulsive, and he stepped out not only on an impulse, but he said, Lord, if it's you, you bid me to come. And Jesus knew that if Simon would just step over the side of that boat, he could walk on water. He did, until his doubt caught up with him. And there's going to be times your doubt, your humanity, your human reasoning is going to come about, and it's going to show up. But Jesus says, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? O thou of little faith, why did you doubt? Have you ever wondered what Peter felt like after that? Well, I'm the one that's been tagged with that little faith. But I'd rather have a little faith that allowed me to do something the rest of the boat didn't do than to sit in the boat and wonder, what if I could have walked on water? Because I'll tell you, from that day on in Simon's ministry, I'm thinking that those steps he took on the water prepared him for a lot of other unstable situations, a lot of shaky circumstances. It prepared him. It may have been the impetus for Simon to stand up on the day of Pentecost and preach the message of salvation in Acts chapter 2, because he knew what it was like to step over the side and go into the unknown. And he remembers the few steps before human reasoning caught up with him. See, you can go back and you can remember and you can visualize what it was like at that moment when you operated in faith. We all have the ability to do that. What was it like for those few moments? I can take those few moments and I can build a case with those few moments and say, God used me for a while. And if he could use me for 3 or 4 or 5 steps, then next time I can take 7 or 8, 9, 10. And it may not be on water. It may be steps into an unknown situation. It may be a circumstance that would seem to undermine me and pull me away. It may be something that is so foreign to me, I'm not cut out for it. But if I can just step over the side of the boat and do like I did, I wonder how often he referred back to those few steps on water. If we go back to the arsenal of our testimonies, and sometimes it's a museum, wonderful things to see, but sometimes it's an arsenal. And our testimonies of the past, we need to go back to them and pull them out. Go back through that situation where that loved one was sick and you didn't know if they was going to pull through. Remember how that faith came on you and you was able to walk in faith and say, God, I'm trusting you. I'm believing you for this. Remember the job that you prayed for and you didn't really have a great chance of getting the job. But you said, Lord, I want that job and I want to get that job. You had enough faith. You had enough faith. See, everybody has unbelief. Everybody that has faith also has unbelief. It's like that other twin sitting right next to you. So you have faith, you're also going to have unbelief. That's just how it is to be human. We're going to have unbelief. And when a man steps over the side of the boat into some choppy water, it would have helped a little bit if the water had been really smooth maybe, but water's not that way. But he had to reflect back on that time and time again in his ministry and think, I stepped over the side of a boat and I walked a little bit. I walked a little bit. But see, Jesus reached out and took him by the hand. He always makes up the difference. So don't worry. Act in faith, walk in faith, see in faith. And let's see what God can do with the rest of it. Be faithful. Keep looking up. God is in control. God bless you in Jesus' name.